and welcome to another weekly update. First of all, apologies for the audio in this one. Some kind of last minute technical things hit me first thing this morning, and I didn't want to kind of delay. I have this kind of fairly fixed time window in which to do these weekly updates, and I didn't want to get to the point where I'd like dismantled everything and nothing was working and then I ran out of time. So I hope this audio is okay. It should be fine again for next time. All right, let's talk about everything that's going on because there's quite a few things happening. And so the first thing I want to talk about is a blog post that I put out in the week about new stuff coming to the Microsoft Teams App Store for developers, specifically rating and reviewing of apps. This is going to be really interesting. Users are going to be able to feedback in the App Store by leaving star ratings and, well, I assume they're stars, I don't know, ratings and reviews on apps that they're using. And this is going to be really interesting on a number of different fronts. So we don't have a ton of information about this. We have a roadmap item. So here's my blog post and here's some of the stuff I took out of the roadmap item. So this is going to be both first party and third party apps. So yep, developers can get involved in this. It's also going to be, it sounds like it's also going to be Microsoft first party apps that are eligible to be rated and reviewed, which is interesting. And they're going to be visible to people browsing on AppSource, also within the Teams store. So you're going to be able to see this feedback stuff. It's going to be anonymous by default, but there is also going to be a feedback loop, a way for developers to respond, which is good as well. So why is this a good thing for developers? Well, I think first of all, like on the outset, it's good to get user feedback, and I think kind of at one level everyone agrees that that's a nice idea, and this makes that easier. So a lot of developers will already have some kind of feedback loop in place for raising tickets or just giving general feedback. But if you're a smaller like indie developer, an ISV, something like that, you might not, and so you might be relying on Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that for your feedback loop. This helps make that a little bit easier by giving one sort of extra place for users to give feedback. And I think the hope is that the good apps are going to bubble to the top. Certainly the most used apps is what's probably more likely as well. As a developer, I think it's also going to be really interesting to get a feel for how your app rates alongside other third-party apps. And what I mean by that is not necessarily for quality, although I think that's going to be interesting, but actually as much as anything else for usage numbers. So you, as an app developer today, you don't really know kind of where your app sits. Like, what am I trying to say? You know how many people use your app, but you don't know how many people use other apps in your industry or your competitors and stuff like that. This will give you a little bit of a feel because you'll be able to see the number of reviews and the number of feedback items relative to you. So you'll be able to do some kind of fairly basic comparisons on, how is my app doing for numbers compared to others? Because, if we assume that, 1% of users feedback, then, if my app has 20 reviews and my competitor has 120 reviews, that gives you a feel for relative traffic levels. So it's kind of a crude tool there. I think it's going to be good for users. It's useful to be able to feedback stuff and kind of leave your comments. I do think it could end up being just like another area that developers and ISVs have to check for potentially negative comments so that they can respond to them. Hopefully, Microsoft make that easier for developers with kind of proactive notifications and emails, drawing their attention to the fact that there's a review that they might want to reply to. It would be great if there were rules around that, so like only notify me if it's like a 3-star and below or something like that. But we'll have to see how that goes. This is expected to be rolling out in October, so it is coming quite soon. I expect it's going to be one of the things that get talked about at Ignite as well. If you're an IT person, probably for a big enterprise, and you're listening to this and thinking, heck no, this is not what I want for my users, there is a way to turn this off. It's bundled in with the optional connected experiences stuff, which controls a whole load of other things, but it will also include this, so you'll be able to turn off the ability for users to leave that feedback from there. a little bit unclear for me anyway on if you turn that off so users can't leave reviews and ratings, can they still see other people's? Not sure about that. So I think we'll just have to see how that pans out. But this is coming soon. Overall, I think it's a good thing for the team's app store. It's a natural progression of an app store. It's it's what you expect from an app store. So I think it's a good thing. And in terms of implementation, we'll just have to see how it goes. All right, big news now. If you're an Exchange person and if you use EWS, the old Exchange Web Services, this is for you. So pay attention. Big news. If you use Exchange Web Services, you'll know that they've been kind of going away for a while now, and that going away process has kind of sped up and slowed down as we've gone on. It started back in 2018. Now, Microsoft are announcing what looks to be a final end date for EWS of the 1st of October 2026, so 3 years out from now. Which, I mean, 3 years is quite a long time, but what I would also say is you've got a 3-year window, but in that 3-year window, how much investment, bug fixing, dev effort do you think Microsoft are going to put into EWS right now? I mean, I know they're going to keep the lights on because they're bound to, like that's part of their service agreement. They give this long window of retirement for something that is in GA, but right, that like it's not going to be the focus of their attention. What's interesting about the blog post that announces this, a couple of things I want to point out. So one of the big feedback items from EWS people, where people still using EWS today, is that they're not necessarily using it because they want to, because Microsoft are trying to push them over to Graph, and that's the that's the messaging in this blog post too. Go to Graph. Graph is the successor to EWS. The thing that I hear from people all the time who still use EWS is that they would love to move to Graph, but they can't because EWS is doing things that Graph does not do, and that feature gap is the problem. So the feature gap is addressed here, and what Microsoft say here is there are some things that there's a whole load of things they know about. Here are 4 things that they think are the most popular asks, and these are the ones that they're looking to close. They are also looking to close others, but they are leaving open the possibility that not all functionality will make it, as they say, to Microsoft Graph. So what I would say is, if you are using EWS today, and this is you, review this list of 4 items here. If the functionality you're looking for is not in those 4 things, I would give your feedback loud and clear to make sure that they understand that this is an important item that needs to make it to Graph, and you need to try and basically get in on this other gaps thing and make sure that it doesn't get forgotten about because they didn't think anyone was using it. So there's a link, in fact there isn't a link to do that. You'll need to go and find how to feedback to them. That's interesting. So there's a what's new in Microsoft Graph page, which is not going to be very helpful to you, but you will need to go through whatever routes you already have to raise issues with EWS, or through your account manager at Microsoft, or someone shout it from the hilltops if there's functionality in EWS that is not in Graph, especially if it's not listed in that blog post, because you are on a race now to convince Microsoft to bring that functionality to Microsoft Graph before they completely turn off EWS, especially if you've got an application that really depends on it, and it would be a real problem for you if it went away. So yeah, I mean, I feel like this news has been coming for a while. It feels like this is said without any knowledge, like insider knowledge or anything like that, but it does feel like in the past 6 to 12 months, as Microsoft have really tightened their belts when it comes to costs and cost reductions, and tied up with that is all the kind of terrible news we've been hearing about staff and staffing numbers, but it does also feel like they're much more punchy about cutting back on probably the things that are costing them money and not making them money. And I expect that EWS falls into that camp at the moment. So that's why I think they're just trying to rationalize a little bit, get down to a core set of functionality. And then the other side of that is that we're seeing that functionality being milked as much as possible for additional cash. All right. That's big news if you're an EWS developer. So yeah, take note. You've got work to do to figure out if you're impacted by this, and then shout if you are. Okay, let's talk Copilot, because the big news of last week was the Copilot announcement, and I've got that's my last blog post, is the Copilot announcement, just in case you haven't seen it, just because there's some interesting stuff in there I wanted to draw your attention to. But just before that is a blog post kind of aimed at developers around Copilot plugins. Now, there's nothing really new in this that we haven't already discussed quite a few times, which is, what can developers do today for building extensions to Copilot, which is a common question. And I've done a whole blog post about how you could prepare. I won't put a link to it, but the top level is, like, the easiest thing you can do right now is write Microsoft Teams message extensions, because they are compatible, if you like, with Copilot. But there's a whole blog post here that talks about things that you can do, and different plugins that people are building. There's an interesting, so we're seeing some output from the early access program from Copilot. We're seeing some kind of these screenshots and videos of people using plugins in Copilot. So the idea is that you can call out to, if you ask your Copilot to do something and it knows that there is a plugin that can do that, which is done by, your plugin having a manifest built for Copilot to tell it what it can do, then it will call out to the plugin, and it will feed it, the information from the context and the intent, if you like, which kind of it's a good idea, and I think it's a very good idea to reuse Teams extensions, because it means that Copilot has a whole bunch of plugins available from day one, which is really important, I think. So there's this example here. There's a Jira example. There's this one here about mural boards. I think this is good. I think basically this is a call to arms for developers to kind of keep building their plugins on using messaging extensions, so that they're ready. So there's nothing really new in here. I just wanted to call it out because it's another iteration on the tech community site around, like, things that developers can be doing today, and that's one area. The other big area is connectors, so graph connectors and Power Platform connectors, to bring your data into the Microsoft 365 landscape so that Copilot can understand it and reason over it. So you've kind of got two options. If you're a developer that's sitting on lots of data, have a look at connectors. If you're a developer for an app that provides functionality, go and have a look at add-ins. But I've covered all this in a previous blog post. I just wanted to go through this Microsoft blog post as well, just to let you know that they're also shouting this stuff, so it's worth paying attention to. All right, finally, you've almost certainly read this already, but this is the Microsoft 365 Copilot General Availability blog post, announcing that November the 1st is when it's going to be generally available. There's not an awful lot in here of substance that we didn't like, that I didn't, either of us really, you and me, really knew. I didn't already know. I don't think. There's a couple of interesting things with the dates around Copilot and Windows, but specifically to Microsoft 365 Copilot, it does look like there's a separation between Copilot that goes into the Microsoft 365 apps, so your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Teams, and Microsoft 365 Chat. These are being talked about as two separate things, and it feels like, and it looks like, that when they land, they are going to be two separate things. That's an interesting place for Microsoft to land. I get it. It feels like if you were building Copilot at scale and you had a bunch of features to deliver, one of which was automating your first-party applications, and the other of which was reasoning over user data, and creating a large language model backed by users' tenant data, you may well give those to separate teams, and what you end up with then is two separate products. You end up with Copilot in each of the apps, and then you end up with a separate product, which is Microsoft 365 Chat. I don't think that's the best thing for users, if I'm honest. I would like to see one Copilot, and it surfaces in each of the applications. And when it's in Word, it does Word things, and when it's in Excel, it does Excel things. But at any moment in time, you can ask it a question about your sales data and it will understand. I don't like this idea of having to go out to Microsoft 365 chat just to talk about my sales data. And I'm going to be really interested to see how that works when, and I might be, a lot of this is like, we haven't played with it, we don't know what it's like, so I might not be correct in what I'm saying. Just as a massive disclaimer, if you're on the Copilot Early Access program and you know this is wrong, please reach out and let me know. I'd love to be able to correct this, but I need to understand really how I go from a conversation with Microsoft 365 chat about my data to, okay, that's great information, make me something in Word for this. And then jump to the Copilot in Word, where I can then drive Word around with this data. Like, that's what I want in my head. I feel like that's what users want. And a little bit of this is Microsoft kind of shipping their org chart, where they've got different product teams delivering on these things, so they end up as different products. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes. There's an interesting couple of sentences I do just want to call out here. This bit here I think was really interesting. So we know it's going to be available from the 1st of November, but the bit I want to highlight is this: early access program customers will have the first opportunity to deploy Copilot across their organizations when it is generally available. I don't understand what that means. What it might mean is that, well, if you're in the early access program, you've already done 99.5% of the work you're deploying Copilot. So yes, you're going to be first because Microsoft are going to flick a switch and your preview is going to go to GA and you're done. Or are they saying, we're going to stage this rollout, and the first people we're going to roll it out to whilst everyone else waits are the early access program people? So actually, it's only those people that are going to have it on 1st of November. So I think that will be interesting, especially as the early access program has expanded out to a select group of consumers and small business customers. So in terms of the actual timings of how this stuff gets rolled out, I would say don't necessarily assume that you are going to be able to get it on November the 1st, day one. Just keep an eye to the ground, talk to your account manager, figure out what that process looks like. And it might be fine, might not be. It wouldn't surprise me if they're staging it a little bit because of either capacity or just onboarding, or perhaps we don't even really know, the onboarding steps. There's not been an awful lot of stuff written up from the early access program about onboarding and deployment, so we don't know what that process looks like. But hopefully, it's been really good that they've done this early access program because they will have learnt a lot in going through it on how to onboard people and what that onboarding process looks like. So everybody will be at an advantage there, so that's good. But we don't really know what it is right now. Okay, that's enough from me. It's time to start the week. This week's going to be fun. We've got collab days at Bletchley Park in the UK on Wednesday. I'm going to be talking all about some really interesting new stuff in Azure Communication Services and how it can talk to Microsoft Teams in new and interesting ways, and also going over the existing ways in which it talks to Microsoft Teams. It's a very kind of Azure meets Teams focused talk that I'm doing. 2 talks actually, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So that's going to be an awful lot of fun. Very much looking forward to collab days. It's great to get together again with people and do a conference. And I like this one because it's only 3 hours away. All right. Yes, I think that's everything from me. Whatever it is you're doing today, have a great one, and I will speak to you again next time.